I mean, are we having issues with migration? Because imagine, I think we offered 3 operating platforms. If I can remember correctly, was Linux, AIX, and
Linux.
Microsoft.
Yeah, Microsoft.
Right. So are we having issues where people are trying to move from the departments you have worked with the migration? I mean, is that being successful? Because I know sometimes certain operating systems don't play well with others in terms of integration.
I think early on in the adoption approach and implementation in its infancy of CalCloud, we had some issues, but since those issues have been addressed, so now we're onboarding these folks within these different service area competencies on a regular basis. So we're not seeing those challenges. I think where our challenges are in terms of lessons learned are with these larger applications that are huge systems and how you re-platform and rehost those. You have to go through the system development lifecycle to design, test, and build and deploy to ensure before you move it over and cut over that it's done successfully and have a contingency plan in place to fall back in case there's a challenge. And I think those are the areas that we've discovered some lessons learned is how to effectively manage that, to make sure we have a mixture of vendor expertise on site, state resources, and also our IBM customer on site to ensure that there's efficiency and effectiveness in those transition cutovers. So that's an area that we've also seen. Another area that I think we've seen some efficiencies in, again, is bringing our state community into this process of how to manage cloud. As Director Ramos mentioned, these are new technologies. It's new to the state, and we're in the process of transitioning folks into these new lines of business so they can take ownership of this as well and learn new skill sets. And also, too, we can leverage and retain millennials and bring in new folks into the workforce to see the state is transitioning into a smarter government for technology.
Got it. So how has that process been a year ago? Or a little over a year ago, some of the vendors had concerns about being integrated. Your comments suggest that they provided input and been part of the solution. How's that relationship with the department and the vendors kind of moving forward, given where we were a year and a half ago to where we're at today?
Sure. You know, I think the relationship, as Carlos mentioned, has drastically improved. You know, we sought out to work with the vendor community. We went to the associations. We talked about our new adoption strategy. We talked about an opportunity for them to provide comments and feedback into the process. We talked about being vendor agnostic in terms of bringing lots of vendors into the portfolio, not only helping with infrastructure as a service as subcontractors, but also with our vendor-hosted subscription services, that there was an opportunity for them to come in and provide cloud services. And so we've had a number of cloud forums. We had a vendor forum in September of last year that really laid out our new strategy, our new approach, our new plan, gave them an opportunity to ask questions and solicit feedback from them. And we took a lot of that into consideration. And I'll give you a couple of examples. In our assessment and migration component that I spoke to, before we sent it out to the community to get bids, we sent it to the vendor community for feedback in terms of what is the response process? What do you think about the solicitation? Is it going to meet our needs? Is it going to meet your needs? Is this the way we need to go with cloud in terms of doing assessment and migrations within departments? And so we got back a lot of good feedback from that approach. And as opposed to that, we decided, as opposed to doing kind of a subscription-based service for vendors, just to do a one-size-fits-all, that the best vendor could win when we send those solicitations out for assessment and migrations. And that way, as opposed to maybe qualifying 6 vendors, we can send this out to the universe of vendors who are qualified to do these types of solicitations. So that was feedback we got from the vendor community that I thought was well received. And from now on, anytime we go out and do an IFB for a VHSS solution, we're going to send that to the vendor community first to elicit comments and feedback.
I imagine it just provides more opportunities through the VHSS system.
One other thing that I think is also important in the way of the relationships with vendors. I mentioned earlier, we went to our customers and asked them, what are the services that you want? At the vendor forum, we shared that. We shared with the vendors, look, this is what our customers are asking for. These are the things that are on our horizon, on our roadmap of things that we're going to be soliciting, in the time is to come. I think that also, it's a little more fair to the vendors so that they know, okay, they're not trying to sell us something that our customers aren't asking for. Because, as you can imagine, we get approached a lot by pretty much every cloud provider saying, hey, there's a lot of people that want it. And we say, but when we ask them, this is what they said.
And what are some of those products that are on the horizon that maybe departments can start thinking?
It's the ones that I mentioned earlier, the e-signatures, the timekeeping, the learning management system,
recovery,
backup recovery, disaster recovery, the collaboration tools.
Got it. And so for this new system, it's kind of off-the-shelf, a la carte. I forgot what exact
commercial off-the-shelf
analogy you used earlier. But are we going to get to a point where we have so many products on the shelf that it becomes burdensome? Or how are we trying to control, I know we said we wanted to do things like record keeping or collaboration, have that work across different departments, but how are we helping focus that with the vendors and yourselves and, saying, look, here's kind of what's most efficient instead of having,
So our strategy has always been through the Office of Technology Services to offer enterprise technology services. So, which is not to say that all technology comes through our department. Departments have their own technology operations oftentimes and their own needs. Sometimes we have departments that have a very unique application or solution that they need. I don't think that that's going to change as much. So our strategy is to focus on those services in the portfolio that a number of departments want. That's why we call them enterprise, so that have applicability across the state. So I think what you're going to see is you're going to see us continue to focus on those services, the ones where there's, I think our threshold is 5 departments minimum that want the same service, right? And so I think that'll keep the portfolio from getting so unwieldy that there's just a bunch of one-offs in there. It's going to be services that departments need. And the other thing that we need to recognize is government, by and large, functions on technology, pretty much in everything we do. Right, everything from the way we keep timesheets to the way that we manage our HR to the way that we issue licenses to pretty much everything, the way we do accounting, the way we do track constituent letters coming in, those sorts of things. So it's the common systems that you're going to see through our portfolio.
So maybe you could clarify something for me, because I'm trying to understand this, because the old motto of enterprising, you bought a license, you placed it on your PC or whatever, and you had it. Then earlier we were talking about having VHSS, and you're paying for what you use as you use it and as you go along. So how is this enterprising and pay as you use? They seem not to coincide with each other. It's usually you do one or the other, and maybe I'm just thinking of the old IT world.
I was talking earlier about how even in the technology companies are changing to the cloud model. That is the way it used to work. You would buy a piece of software or some sort of technology. You'd put it into your floor space or into your office, and let's say something like an operating system. You would buy an operating system. You'd get a CD. You'd load it into your computer, and you'd run it. Then it'd be up to you to patch it and keep it current. And then 3 to 5 years down the road, that company would say, "Oh, we're not supporting that operating version anymore. You got to go to a different one." So what you would have to do is you'd have to say, "Oh crap! Excuse me. I integrated all these other systems. My apologies. I completely apologize for that. I integrated all these other systems into it. Now I got to go back and replace the operating system. Keep my computer up to date, or it's time to switch out the hardware." In a cloud model, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, you'll subscribe to an operating system or office productivity tools. When the version changes, you get that version. You get it for free. All the upgrades, all the models, all the patching, all that sort of stuff.
It's like a subscription, basically.
Right. And so you no longer have to do that. Now, what's interesting, though, is some companies are no longer offering CDs. You can't buy software that way anymore. So, like it or not, the industry is moving towards a cloud model. So we're trying to adapt to it. I think you will still see, some providers and in some cases some technologies that individual departments operate, that they're the only ones that operate it for, at the state level. So again, it doesn't make sense for us to offer it as an enterprise offering.
Yeah, I think a great example of a subscription services office productivity, as Carlos mentioned, is Microsoft Government Email. We're going to move the state to a single email system. So that means almost 200,000 boxes over the next 15 to 18 months will be migrating to Microsoft Government Cloud. Office 365 is part of our productivity suite now under vendor-hosted solutions. I think the significance of that is it gets us to really a single statewide ID. It gets us to tool factor authentication with an email. And what I'm talking about is Enterprise Mobility Suite is one of the things that's operated on and comes with a Microsoft suite. So it'll have single sign-on provisioning. And what that means is any types of applications you have under it, whether it be your smartphone or handheld device, will be covered. And it covers multiple areas of authentication. And I think this is huge in terms of safeguarding the state's security on mobile tablets and smartphones that we all have today. That'll be a service that we're providing and we'll be able to provide to our 200,000 customers, which I think increases our security footprint as well and gets us to a common standard that we need to in the state.
No, that seems exciting and promising. obviously there's other vendors that would love to have that contract.
Sure.
But
well, and we do competitively bid these things, so so vendors have an opportunity. But as I was talking about earlier, you may need to adopt your business model if you're a vendor who doesn't have a cloud model or doesn't have a cloud model that's geared towards government.
Yeah. So let me ask in general, because we've been talking about this, and you talked about bundling some of these services. How competitive or comparative is that to what's on the market now? Because I've heard some concerns like, well, CalCloud and IT, they're offering this bundle, and yeah, it's scalable, but it's not comparative to what's actually out there in terms of value.
Sure.
Something you had mentioned earlier in your comments.
Sure. So I guess I would say in a sense it's a little bit difficult to determine that. If you go out to what the public offerings are, they're broken out in individual levels, so you can go out and do a little bit of comparison shopping. I would say they're generally lower costs than what we're seeing for our offering. But as you start layering in the additional services that you want, or some of the things that we want, like we want an environment that is strictly for public sector, or we need connectivity to that environment, or we need a certain level of additional compute power or storage power. Those costs start to rise. When we've done apples to apples comparisons, they're lower, but they're slightly lower. They're not orders of magnitude lower than what we're paying at the public sector. And again, as I was saying, it's a bit of a trade-off, because what we're seeing from our customers is, okay, well, you can go out to the public marketplace, but when it comes time to transition, there's some issues there. Or when it comes time to say, hey, there was an incident, there's a security incident, or do we know that they're going to report it, or do we know that they're going to allow us to come in and inspect the system that's there, or that the logs are there, or do we know that a system that's in the public cloud is going to be able to integrate to other state systems that are in a state environment, whether it's a controller's office system or a Department of Human Resources system. A lot of our systems have to integrate with each other. So those add additional costs if you're going to be out in the public cloud, let's say.
Right. So it is very comparative.
I think it's comparative. I'm not going to say that we're right there and we're rock bottom prices, but it's at the market rate. And
do we anticipate prices being more value based as more departments get on board with the system? I mean, there is something to be said about scalability as well.
And I think that's one of the things we're going to look at is volume pricing. As more departments bring on, what can we do in terms of lowering the rates? I'll go back to what Carlos said with FedRAMP. In terms of other service providers, they do charge for FedRAMP if you're going to put your data in there. That's part of the service that we're providing at no additional charge to what we've talked on our rates. So you're getting the highest level of security compliance within our cloud in terms of those rate structures, where those other organizations may charge you an additional rate for FedRAMP adherence.
Right. So that's, again, you can't just go off of what's, the base catalog price. You have to do an apples and fair comparison.
So that's with the security protocols and everything else.
Sure.
Got it. So help me understand, because I was looking at what you guys handed out for the IaaS server packages and the bundling, but it looks like whatever size I get, small, medium, large, extra large, the storage space is only still 90 gigs. How does that work?
Well, we have 2 gigahertz of data in the system, so we can expand storage space as needed for a customer. So really what happens when they come in, they're provisioned a tenant space. So it's like having your own infrastructure and your own organization. You have your own tenant space within CalCloud. So we can raise those additional storage and rates or memory as needed based on those customer requirements. So there is flexibility within that area based on those requirement needs.
Got it.
So earlier when we were talking about the need to do some planning for transition, those are the sorts of considerations that need to be taken as you're trying to structure out a package or an offering for individual departments. That's part of the planning that goes into it as well.
Good.
Because one of the areas that we've also found as well is that some of the larger systems require additional memory. And so we want to make sure that we have that additional memory in the system so they can access the system and there's no problems with the system slowing down. So those are some of the things that we're seeing when we collect requirements and we do that assessment before we actually do a cutover.
Okay. Got it. So let me just ask a question I think I asked at last year's hearing was, are we on time? Are we on budget in terms of expanding this out to all the different departments as we continue to move on?
We're on time. We've stood up our system or our environment in our infrastructure environment. We're moving rapidly. We're now offering Office 365. We're in the process of migrating the emails applications and adding services. Actually, we're a little bit under budget compared to what was planned for this year, and this is still estimation, but I think for this year we're budgeted at around a little under $10 million. We anticipate we're going to spend about $6.5 million.
Wow.
And a lot of that comes from the fact that we're not paying unless we're using it. Right. So if you're a vendor, you get to be in the catalog, but you don't get to bill until you actually have customers that are actually
utilizing the service.
Using the service. So, as the portfolio grows, we anticipate probably additional resources transitioning to maintain the portfolio. But right now we're under budget.
Got it. No, thank you. And then just from the procurement side, right? We're used to seeing in the past some of these big IT kind of failures, but moving to this CalCloud VHSS kind of system, I mean, does that insulate us from those types of huge failures kind of moving forward, or are we susceptible of that? Like, since we're moving the entire department's email service, for instance, like you just said, I mean, what's the risk still for the state as we continue to move forward?
I think it's a component of helping to prevent and avoid those sorts of catastrophic failures that we've seen in the past. But it's not the end-all, be-all answer. There's a number of other initiatives that we're taking on that I can talk about just at a very high level that I think will move us in that direction. But here's what being able to access an existing system that's already deployed, that's already developed, and other departments are using, that's going to reduce the risk. That's going to reduce the risk of you going out and trying to build your own or run your own, right? Because you're adding into an existing mature solution set. And the procurement is a lot quicker in that regard than going out and a department doing its own procurement. In terms of some of the other things that we are doing, just across the board, separate from cloud computing, to try and manage and mitigate that risk, is we're involving our procurement planning much earlier in the project approval process. So they're involved right from the get-go to understand how our system is being architected. Is a department trying to buy something that another department already has? If so, don't buy it. Just leverage what they already have.
Got it.
We're also doing things such as we've established an Office of Project Management. Many times it's not just the procurement, or it's not even a procurement challenge that causes a project to come in late or miss some of its functionality or bust its budget. It's that the state didn't do a really good job of managing either the contractor that's building it or the effort of bringing a department through the changes it needs to make to adopt a new system. So we've established an Office of Project Management with a professional team of project managers. We've established an Office of Consultants, state staff with expertise in specific areas that act as a SWAT team. So we send them out when a department needs help in negotiating a contract, or planning a schedule, or developing a testing methodology for their engagements. We've developed training academies and training classes where, again, we have folks that are very experienced in doing business in California. These are state employees that have done successfully state projects that can come in and teach the rest of the state staff on specific topics. And really what we do is we try to target those areas that we see as the most common challenges on projects. So and then fundamentally we're redoing our project approval process, which again makes departments go through a more structured planning effort before they ever come out, get to the street with a bid. They have to know what's your business problem that you're trying to solve. How are you sure that what your problem is that you don't need to change your business practices? Let's do that first, and then you come out and get a system. So we're taking on a number of different efforts, but
given
cloud
all these
computing definitely
protocols
helps.
and what you have in place, is it fair to say then, we're establishing certain benchmarks that must be met so that at the end of the day we're not kind of held liable, holding the bag for a big project that ultimately is going to fail?
Can you repeat the question? I'm not sure what the question is.
Are we setting benchmarks then along the process to make sure that we're getting our value, getting what needs to be done instead of,
Sure. So I guess I would answer it this way. Benchmarks are kind of kind of marks, right, that you're trying to make sure that you meet certain minimum thresholds. The initiatives that I talked to are actually changes in operational practices that are going to lead us to better performance and better outcomes. So I think what you will see, for example, with our project approval changes, I think you're going to see less project failures. I think you're going to see more accuracy when it comes to predicting cost and schedule. And you're going to ultimately see systems that get delivered that actually do what departments need them to do. I want to mention one other initiative that we're taking on, since you mentioned benchmarks, only because I think you as members are going to hear a lot about this from our vendor community. We're in the process of rolling out a performance evaluation system for vendors. And so what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we're going to measure you on 5 things when you engage in a contract for the state to build us a system or to deliver a system. We're going to find out, are you delivering on time? Are you delivering within the budget that you said you were going to deliver? Are you delivering a quality of service or goods that's good quality? And I can't remember the other ones, but there's 4 or 5 pretty basic metrics. Yeah, I got that one. Oh, and cost, within cost. And so what we're doing is we're saying, okay, when we put out a bid, we're going to put this into the bid. Say, hey, when you come in and bid on a state of California project, we're going to measure you on these things. We're going to rate you, and then we're going to report it. And so once a quarter, you're going to sit down with the person that's managing the engagement from the state side and say, okay, how'd you do? Quality there? Timeliness of deliverables was there, and we're on budget, and we're delivering the scope that we need. Then we're going to publish that. We're going to make it available.
I like it.
Well, I think it's going to drive better performance on the vendor side, and then we're going to use it next time we go to bid, right? So we're going to say, okay, we need somebody to come in and build us a system. What we're going to do is we're going to take those scorecards and say, as we evaluate your bid, we're going to look at how you did before. Absolutely. Now, I think what that is also going to drive is it's going to drive the state agencies to have to be able to back it up, to be able to say, if I'm rating you for being late, it better not be my fault as a state agency. So let's make sure we're doing our part as well. So I bring that up only because we're going to pilot it. We've already talked to the vendor community. In fact, we asked them to help us develop it. But we're still going to get some folks that are going to come back and say, hey, I don't want my name up there, or I don't want you to rate us that way. So you may hear from that, from the vendor community.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and open it up to members. I know Ms. Olson had a question.
Thank you. I have a few. First, I do want to thank both chairs for holding these hearings. I've been impressed at how much chairs of committees are really stepping up the role and responsibility of us in the legislature to do oversight. So thank you for holding this today. And for Caltech to take these hearings seriously. I know you guys have been the subject of many of them over the last couple of years, and we appreciate the thorough information that you're providing to us. It sounds like in your presentation we're making good progress. Greater adoption of agencies, both at the state and local level, which is great. Lowering costs a bit by renegotiating the contract with IBM, which is great. Soliciting feedback from the vendor community at the outset, which all steps in the right direction. Having said that, I still have a few questions and concerns if we could engage on a little bit. First, you mentioned that the agencies you've been working with, like a government-owned and government-only cloud system. And I'm curious, what is that based on? Was there a formal survey that your department did of agencies to determine whether that's the case? And then in follow-up to that, were they provided information based on data and research about a government-owned and only cloud system versus commercial offerings? What are the security features of each? And so were they providing that feedback based on any informed education given to them?
Sure. So I can jump in, and then Chris, feel free to add in. So that's based on our discussions and our engagements with the customers. So when we engage a customer, when a prospective customer comes to us and says, "Hey, well, what are you offering?" and we're interested in using your services, we engage with them very directly and sit down and say, "Okay, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What do you think your needs are?" And we engage with them to find out everything from what are your needs for computing power, storage, connectivity, all those sorts of things. What are your needs for the sort of information you're going to have in there? What level of security does it need? How do you classify that information? And so we engage with them very directly, and especially as we see other government sector, public sector entities, especially at the local level, when they come and engage with us, that's one of the first things that they say is, we like the idea of having it there. Well, why? Well, because it avoids having to worry about transition in 5 years. It avoids having to fight with somebody if the company goes out of business, or if we end up having to transition to a different provider about getting our data back, or knowing who's going to actually be handling our data. We had a situation, I'm not going to name the company, but a cloud services provider that had some state agencies as customers that went out of business. And literally, the customers got an email saying, hey, if you want your data, you better get to us now. When you try to reach out to them, they were not available. So departments are like, oh, wait a minute. How do I get that back? That's really critical and important to me, or I don't have a tool set anymore. So stability is important, and that ability to know where their information is and who's touching it and who has access to it. I was involved in a number of discussions, or in some discussions with a number of other state CIOs who are leveraging commercial cloud technologies. Again, I'm not going to name the companies, but a pretty well-known commercial provider. They're saying in one case, even though we had these agreements, we came to find out that our data was being hosted in another country, even though we had an agreement that wasn't going to be the case. So they have those sorts of concerns, and the way that we're aware of them is through direct engagement with our customers. Mm-hmm. In terms of, do we go and say, oh, well, here's a cost comparison between us and XYZ company or ABC company? We don't necessarily do that. A lot of times they've done the research themselves. They're, I shared with you the names of the agencies that are out there, and to their credit, a lot of the commercial providers are out there talking to them very directly as well. So
I just want to make sure, and obviously going out of business would be of grave concern to our agencies at all levels, but I want to make sure that the feedback isn't based on myths, but is based on realities.
No, it's
and from the research I've done, it appears that most Fortune 500 companies, most government institutions around the world are still benefiting from commercial offerings. Okay. So again, I just want to make sure we're not propagating myths that a government-only solution is the only secure, stable option.
And so I know you want to jump in, but one of the other things I will say is departments have to make their decisions as well, right? Not all systems, not all data is equal. In some cases, some of the stuff that they may be doing out in the commercial sector is perfectly appropriate. But what we've seen is the stuff that folks are bringing in, that's the rationale behind it.
Okay.
Well, it seems to me, too, through the VHSS system, we're offering some of those vendors that departments are able to utilize as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And what I was going to say, too, Christian, is one of the things we also do with departments is we do what's called a suitability analysis. And really that's a checklist to apprise whether that department's system is a good candidate to go to CalCloud Infrastructure as a Service. If it's not, then we take a look at software as a service, and to your point, Chair, other vendor-hosted subscription services to steer them to, if that'll align with their technical specifications and meet their business requirements. So there is a process in place for onboarding folks, as opposed to saying you have to go here and there's
with
no
this
other
one
option.
solution. Okay, that's good to hear. Moving into the cost questions, I agree that particularly in IT projects, cost can't be the only consideration, and I think we've all supported legislation that makes it one of rather than the only when that makes sense. But it gravely concerned me when you indicated that it is not even an overarching consideration at all to most agencies. And obviously we have to be stewards of taxpayer dollars, and I would hate it was just concerning to hear that it may not even be top of mind at all when you're looking at the options. And so I'm curious, and you alluded to this a few minutes ago, are the CalCloud prices competitive with commercial offerings today? Has either the Department of Technology or the individual agencies working with you done its own analysis or used an independent auditor to compare the offerings with cost as at least one of the primary considerations?
So let me first address your first comment. And so I apologize if I conveyed that as, they don't even care about it. That was not what I was trying to convey at all. What I meant to convey is it's an issue, and it's a consideration and a factor for them. what I would say is it's not always the most important factor for them.
Okay.
So I didn't mean to convey that they don't care how they spend the money. They do. Believe me, they hound us on our rates, not only in our cloud service offerings, but all of our other service offerings all the time. You can ask the customers that are coming up after us. So I apologize for that. That was not at all the feeling I was trying to convey. But to your second part of your question, we have done that. We did that on our infrastructure as a service, and as we go out and do our competitive procurements for vendor-hosted subscriptions, we have the market force at play there because there are multiple companies coming in and bidding. So they're competing against each other, first of all. And, we compare, okay, what are you offering it to us as versus what are you offering it at the commercial level for what prices? Sorry for the phrasing there. But we do require through our terms and conditions some level of service or, in some cases, security requirements that they may not offer generally or that they may offer as an add-on. We say, no, it's got to be included. So obviously that gets reflected in the price that they offer us and that we then offer to our customers.
And I think early on, too, we did a marketing analysis when we were negotiating a contract with IBM to look at those core rates and looked at them and said, okay, we're in sync with these prices. But obviously, since we published our prices, those prices were reduced. And it's really hard for us to go to the how low will you go process and price to be competitive at that level.
Okay. Yeah. How much has the state invested in CalCloud to date?
I actually have those numbers here. Just give me a chance to find them here. Okay, so grand total, and this includes all of our infrastructure as a service, all of our vendor-hosted solutions as well, including email. Our office productivity is $40.8 million, and that's over the last 3 years, I believe.
And is there a total budget for the project, or is it reevaluated every year?